Apple Watches are starting to look mostly the same. The new Series 8 and Watch SE look so much like last year's Series 7 that I struggle to tell them apart. But in fact, the new models Apple unveiled last week bring some less obvious changes. The most notable of these is a new temperature sensor that's currently being used for ovulation tracking, as well as an onboard high-G accelerometer that allows for crash detection. The company also unveiled the Watch Ultra, which was specifically designed for outdoor adventurers. The Ultra may be the most exciting smartwatch of the three, but what the Watch SE offers for the money makes it the more interesting device in my book. Plus, Apple shaved $30 off its price, so the SE now costs $250, even though it's basically the same as the $400 Series 8. Honestly, this feels like the smartwatch that most iOS users should consider. In the week I've had the Watch SE, I've been wearing it alongside my Series 7 or the Series 8, which I'm also testing. Size aside, I haven't noticed much of a difference between the three models. The Series 8 is available with 41mm or 45mm cases, and I'm using the latter. It's a little too big for my wrist, but I do appreciate how much easier things are to see on that roomier screen. Meanwhile, the new SE comes in 40mm or 44mm options. I have the smaller version of that one, which I prefer, especially since it's more comfortable to wear to bed. The main features you'll miss if you opt for an SE instead of a Series 8 is the always-on display, ECG reader, blood oxygen app, and the new skin temperature sensor. Like the older SE, this year's model also charges at a slower rate than the Series 7 and 8 and doesn't have a U1 chip for ultra-wideband. It also lacks the IP6X dust resistance rating of its more premium counterparts, so if you're likely to take this tough mudding or to the beach, it might be worth considering a more expensive model. Those who hate chunky bezels will also find the SE's thicker borders off-putting, but without a side-by-side comparison, I didn't notice a big difference. Otherwise, this year's Watch SE actually packs the same system-in-a-package processor as the $400 Series 8 and, like I said before, a high-G accelerometer that makes crash detection possible. In my time with it, the Watch SE has, unsurprisingly, been just as responsive as the Series 8, starting workouts and performing heart rate readings in the same amount of time. It did tend to be slower at telling me it noticed I've been walking outside, but when I agreed to record a workout, it usually showed about the same ongoing duration as the higher-end model. It was also typically faster at recognizing when I've stopped walking than my Series 7. As for the other missing features, frankly, I haven't really used the ECG and blood oxygen readings on the Series 7 that I've worn for a year. I've performed maybe 3 scans of each type in that time, and I definitely rely more on my heart rate than my blood oxygen to gauge my fitness level. I only noticed the always-on display was missing from the Watch SE when I was wearing that and the Series 7, and they both buzzed with an alert. I had to wait a split second for the SE's screen to wake, whereas the notification was ready for immediate viewing on the Series 7. Aside from that though, the AOD didn't greatly impact my experience with the SE. It didn't even affect the battery life, for better or worse. You'd think that not having an always-on display would make the SE last longer, but most days, the SE and my Series 7 lasted the same amount of time, despite the latter having an always-on display. Both of them hung around all day, tracking my morning workouts and frequent outdoor walks while serving up various reminders and alerts. I could usually make it to the next morning with some battery left over too. I've yet to test the new low power mode on the Watch SE itself, but I did try it out on the Series 8 one morning when it only had 20% of juice left ahead of an 8 a.m. workout. I activated low power mode and was able to track the entire 45-minute session and get back home with under 10%. I was also pleasantly surprised to see the Watch SE had 92% of battery left after tracking my sleep overnight. I woke up to a report showing all the zones I'd undergone in my 5 hours of sleep, detailing the amount of time I had spent in core, deep, and REM. This is a watchOS 9 feature though, so if you have an older model, you'll also get it when you update your software. Compared to the last Watch SE, this year's model features a larger screen and the new SIP and the sensors I mentioned earlier. If you're considering upgrading from that model, the new SE will certainly feel fresh. If you're choosing between a new SE and a Series 8 though, it's less of a question of what you can live without and more of how much spare cash do you have. Those who don't mind spending $150 more can buy the Series 8 for the assurance of having every feature that Apple offers. Otherwise, most people will be satisfied with what the Watch SE has to offer for the price.